go to 天气足够的热吗？太热了. Don't worry about it. In a few months, we'll wish it was warm again, right? Once it gets cold. I'm so happy to see you here today. I heard it's going to be, is it going to be like 100 degrees today? Wow, so hot. So I decided not to wear my jacket today. Too hot. I'm so glad to be here, to be with you this morning. We're going to look at John chapter 5 this morning. So you can follow along on the screen. If you have your Bible, you can open up to John chapter 5. The title of my sermon today is Becoming. So I translated that into Chinese as Chengwei. So I guess I kind of struggled with should I call it Chengwei or Biancheng, which is another word for becoming, right? To change. And so I guess you'll have to tell me if I got it right or wrong after my sermon. At the third miracle that Jesus performed today in John chapter 5, the healing of the lame man by the pool. This is the third sign. We've talked about signs in the Gospel of John. So, as an introduction, I want to ask you about becoming a professional. Some of you spend a lot of time and work and money to become a professional, whatever it is that you do, right? And we think a lot about that in life. I think probably Chinese think about that more than even Americans do, if that's possible, right? So you think a lot about your kids, their future, their education. And we all know to become a professional, a doctor, an engineer, a professor, a cook, all of different fields require different kinds of education, also training and experience, a license or a certificate. Um, One of the things that happened for me as a pastor, I'm happy that that I was able to do that. Excuse me, as my little. Thank you, Jan. He asked me earlier if I wanted water. I should have said yes. As a I got ordained in the ministry when I was maybe 23, 24 years old. So I got the certificate. The elders of the church, they came. Thank you. The elders of the church, they came and they laid hands on me. I had to answer a lot of questions. I had to show my experience, my beliefs, and I got ordained into the ministry at that time. Well, most of you who've had a job, you have some kind of training, maybe even a license to do your job. And even after you get the job, there's the continuing learning process, which in most fields, things change, right? Over the last few years, technology, medicine, finances, whatever field you go into, you have to keep it up. So, my point this morning is a lot of people spend a lot of time and thought to do for the rest of their life. So, and that's important, right? You need to be able to make a living for yourself. But how many people do the same thing about their spiritual life? How many people think about where they're at with their relationship with God? How they're going to live their life spiritually? A lot of people don't think about that too much, you know? But we're going to talk about that this morning as we look at this miracle of Jesus. We're going to read now starting in John chapter 5, verses 1 through 5. It's up there on the screen for you in Chinese and in English. I'm going to read it in English. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now, there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethsaida, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, paralyzed. One man was there who had been invalid for 38 years. So Jesus in John, we know he keeps going back and forth between Jerusalem and Galilee. And last week we talked about Jesus being up in Galilee. And now he's come back to Jerusalem for this feast, this holiday of the Jews. He often did that in John. Several times John mentions this. This is the only holiday, we're not told which holiday it was. But he came back to Jerusalem for this holiday, and this was by the sheep gate. Now, Jerusalem had several gates. You could enter by several gates. One of the most famous gates is on the east. It's called the Golden Gate, and it's locked up. Has anybody ever seen that gate in a picture? Or have you ever been there in person? It's right by Mount of Olives. You can look down from Mount of Olives at the Golden Gate, east side of Jerusalem. This is maybe the way I'm wearing it. So this gate, the sheep gate, was in the northeast corner of the city, really close to the temple. You know why it was called the sheep gate? Because that's where they brought the sheep in for the sacrifice at the temple. And there was a pool that was there, and there were people laying around that were sick, just like there's a lot of people today that are sick, right? Today, we have the wonderful thing of modern medicine, right? So we can go to the hospital, pay a lot of money in America to go to the hospital, right? Especially if you don't have insurance. So we go to the hospital, but in those days, people didn't have much of an option for healing in terms of medicine goes. So there was a belief that the angel would come down and touch the water, and the first person that got into the pool got healed. There were lots of people there, blind people, paralyzed people, people with different kinds of infirmities, which is another way of saying a sickness, an infirmity. And so they had this hope that if they got down into the water, that they would be healed. Now this, you might have noticed here, there's a difference in the English translation and the Chinese Union version here. You notice that the English translation leaves a verse out. Well, because that in the early text, this verse doesn't really actually appear. And so it was added probably as a translator, kind of a note to add to this verse. But this pool was called Bethsaida. And there were 5 porches, so there's probably some shade. It was a place where sick people hung out. How long was this man sick? 38 years. Can you imagine sitting by a pool for that long? I think of my brother. My brother, Doug, I don't know if I've ever shared this with the whole congregation. I've shared with some of you. My brother has a mental illness, Jin Bing, and he came down with this illness when he was 28 years old. He's now 59, so 31 years. My mom has taken care of my brother Doug with this mental illness. He's very disabled. He can't go out very much. He can't take care of himself. Wow, my mom has, for 38 years, done everything for him. My mom is going to be 88 years old next month. She still takes care of him. So this man was sick even longer. Can you imagine being sick for 38 years? I mean, he was so disabled that he couldn't get up and get into the water. There was lots of people that wanted to get in, right? To be healed. So this man was in bad shape. So they would do anything to be healed. There was this belief that the angel would come down and touch the water. Okay, let's read on. Verses 6 through 10. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" The sick man answered, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am going, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed, and walk." And at once the man was healed and he took up his bed and walked. Now that day was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It's the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to take up your bed." Wow. Now, Jesus asks a question to the man. What does he ask? Do you want to be healed? Huh. That seems like a strange question to ask a man who's been lame for 38 years, who is sitting by a pool just so he hopes to be the first one to get down into the water and be healed. So Jesus said, "Do you want to be healed?" It's kind of like in English we would say, duh. Yeah, I want to be healed. Of course I want to be healed. So Jesus' question seems a little strange for us. Of course he wanted to be healed. But I think Jesus, the implication of Jesus' question is more than just the physical healing that the man was seeking in his life. And so he was interested in the man's physical well-being, but also his spiritual well-being. Now, I try not to bring a lot of like Greek language into my sermons, but this time I'm going to talk about this Greek word. We're going to talk a little bit about it, and it's the word genesthai. Okay, genesthai. I have it up there in my notes. Jesus used this word. It's not that Jesus just said, "Do you want to be healed?" Jesus said, "Do you want to become healed?" Okay, now you see the connection with my sermon title there, right? Becoming, Chongwei. You want to become healed. So there's like two verbs that are joined together here. So Jesus is talking not just about his physical healing, which is important, but he's also talking about his spiritual healing, which we'll see a little bit more in a minute. So this word, genomai, I'm not trying to bore you with a lot of Greek here, but you're going to see that you probably actually have heard of this word before many times. In English, okay. So in Greek, I have here on my notes the word genomai, and the word genesthai. So I think if you go back one slide, maybe it has those words up there. So let's see here. Okay, the word genomai, I have put here some of the words that we get in English out of that word. We get the word generate. So see the G-E-N? Generate. Comes from that same Greek word, to become, to generate. So if you're at work, do you ever feel like you have to generate too many reports? So generate means to what? To create, to start something. Now it's also a word in the Bible. In English, 创世纪 is what? Genesis. It's a good Latin word. It means to begin. So we call Genesis the book of beginning. See the G-E-N at the beginning of Genesis? Same word, to become. To become. And also, we get the word genetics from that word, genetics. We know what that is, right? It's we all have genes. Not talking about the blue gene, your